Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back to a time of powdered wigs, flickering candlelight, and unspoken conversations. Picture yourself standing in a vast glittering ballroom in 17th century Paris. The air is thick with the scent of expensive perfume and melting beeswax. Hundreds of nobles are crushed around you, their silks and velvets, rustling, their jewels catching the light. It's hot, stiflingly so, but you're not just trying to catch a breeze. You're trying to navigate a social minefield where one wrong move, one misplaced glance, or one incorrect flutter of the object in your hand could mean your utter ruin. This is a world where the most important things are said without a single word, and honestly, you probably won't survive this. The etiquette is so complex, a modern person would likely commit a dozen social sins in the first 5 minutes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love to see where everyone is listening from, so feel free to drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're holding it in your hand right now. It feels delicate yet powerful. It might be made of painted silk stretched over intricately carved ivory sticks. It is, of course, a fan. But how did this simple tool for creating a breeze become one of the most potent and nuanced accessories in history? Its journey is a long and quiet one, beginning in practicality and ending in performance. Long before it graced the gilded courts of Europe, the fan was born of necessity in the sweltering heat of ancient lands. The very first fans weren't meant for flirtation. They were meant to fight off fainting spells. In ancient Egypt, massive fans made of palm leaves or ostrich feathers were mounted on long poles. These weren't for personal use. They were wielded by teams of servants, their sole job to stand for hours, rhythmically waving these enormous screens to create a cooling current for the pharaoh or queen. Imagine being that person, your entire day dedicated to generating a slight puff of air for someone who barely acknowledges your existence. That was the fan's first role, a symbol of ultimate luxury, where even the air you breathe is conditioned by the labor of others. This fixed-screen style of fan, sometimes called a panka, was common across the ancient world, from the palaces of Persia to the courts of the Roman Empire. They were often beautiful, but they were essentially furniture. They were unwieldy, stationary, and belonged to a space rather than a person. The real revolution in the fan's history, the change that allowed it to become a language, was the invention of the folding fan. Historians credit either China or Japan with this ingenious design, which likely appeared sometime between the 7th and 9th centuries. Suddenly, the fan was portable. It could be tucked into a sleeve, hung from a belt, concealed, and then produced with a flourish. This was the pivotal moment. It transformed from a piece of household equipment into a personal accessory. The folding fan slowly made its way west along the silk and spice routes, a whisper of exoticism and clever design. It was Portuguese traders who first brought them back from Japan in significant numbers during the 16th century, introducing this novelty to the European elite. They were an instant sensation. But it was in Italy, the great tastemaker of the Renaissance, that the fan truly began its ascent into high fashion. And from Italy, it was a formidable woman who carried it into the heart of France. When Catherine de' Medici arrived from Florence in 1533 to marry the future King Henri II, she brought with her a retinue of Italian customs, foods, and fashions. And in her hands she often carried a folding fan. The French court, always eager for the next trend, watched closely. At first, it was a curiosity, a clever little device for a bit of personal air conditioning. What a concept! But soon its potential became clear. Yeah, the fan wasn't just useful, it was a blank canvas. By the time we arrive in our 17th century ballroom, the fan in your hand is no longer just a fan. It is a work of art. The sticks known as the mauncher are no longer simple bamboo. They are tortoise-shell mother-of-pearl, or ivory-pierced and carved into breathtakingly intricate, lace-like patterns. The leaf, the part that moves the air, is made of vellum paper or fine silk, and upon it are painted exquisite miniature masterpieces by skilled artists. You might see a scene from Greek mythology, a pastoral landscape with frolicking sheep, or even a topical political cartoon for those feeling particularly bold. It has become a treasure. Holding one was a direct reflection of your wealth, taste, and status. A cheap fan was worse than no fan at all. You could spend more on a fan than you would on a piece of fine furniture, and some were even adorned with diamonds and other precious gems. It's almost comical to imagine fanning your sweaty brow with an object that's worth a small fortune. Historians still argue whether the fan's primary function at court was ever truly for cooling, or if it was almost immediately adopted as a tool for social maneuvering from the moment it became portable. It seems that as soon as it could be carried, it began to speak. It was in essence the very first smartphone, a handheld device you used to project an image of yourself, communicate with your circle, and occasionally play a game or two. The transformation is complete. The fan has journeyed from a giant feather duster, waved by a servant, to a delicate jewel-encrusted scepter of social power, resting now expectantly in your own palm. Your fingers trace the delicate edge of the fan's leaf. The painted scene is of a shepherdess looking coyly over her shoulder in a field of impossible green. You look up from this tiny world and take in the larger one around you. You are standing in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles. 17 massive arched windows line one wall, pouring the golden afternoon light across the parquet floor. Opposite them, 17 identical arches are filled with 357 perfectly polished mirrors. The effect is dazzling, disorienting. The hall is a river of light, reflecting the 1,000 flickering candles of the chandeliers above, and the shimmering silks of the courtiers surrounding you. It was designed to overwhelm, to proclaim the infinite glory of France and its king. And it works. This entire universe, this gilded cage of a palace, is the brainchild of one man, King Louis XIV. He is not here in the hall with you right now, but his presence is everywhere. It's in the sunburst emblem carved into the marble above the doorways. It's in the hushed, reverent tones people use when mentioning his name. It's in the very air you breathe. He is the Sun King, and everyone here is a planet, a moon, a speck of dust trapped in his gravitational pull. The court wasn't always here. The king moved the entire aristocracy from Paris to this sprawling new home in the countryside for one very specific reason: control. After a series of civil wars early in his reign, known as the Front de Louis, decided the safest place for the powerful nobles was right where he could see them. He built Versailles not just as a palace, but as a stage, and on this stage he was the sole director. Life here is an endless, intricate performance. Every single action from the moment you wake to the moment you sleep is governed by a dizzying code of etiquette. The rules are the real currency of the court. Your rank determines whether you can sit on a stool, a chair with arms, or if you must stand for hours until your knees ache. It determines whether you may enter a room through both doors of a set or be relegated to a single side. When approaching the king's chambers, you do not knock. Commoners knock. You, a person of breeding, must gently scratch at the door with the nail of your left little finger, a nail often grown long for this very purpose. It's a world of microscopic distinctions that mean everything. The most sought-after moments of the day are the king's formal awakening and bedtime rituals, the lever and the coucher. These are not private moments. They are the day's main events. As a noble, you would fight, bribe, and scheme for the privilege of entering the king's bedchamber to watch him wake up. The high-ranking courtiers, the grands entrees, get to see him stir from sleep. Lesser nobles are allowed in later in waves to watch him pray, get washed and put on his royal breeches. The ultimate honor, being chosen to hand him his shirt. Think about that. The pinnacle of a powerful duke's day might be the glory of passing a linen garment to the monarch. It sounds absurd, like a strange play, but in Versailles, proximity to the king is power. The closer you are, the more vital you seem. In this stifling, watched environment, that your fan becomes more than just a pretty accessory. Here, an unguarded word can end a career. A frank conversation is impossible when the walls literally have ears. You are under constant surveillance, not just by the king's spies, but by everyone. Every single person in this hall is your rival, watching for a misstep, a sign of weakness. You can't speak your mind. You can't show your boredom. You certainly can't tell that insufferable baron over by the window what you really think of his new wig, which is shedding powder like a snowstorm. This is precisely why a silent language is not just a novelty, it's a necessity. It is the only channel for private communication. Historians still debate whether this suffocating etiquette was purely a masterful stroke of political control by Louis, or if the nobles themselves became willing participants, finding meaning and identity within its intricate, maddening rules. Standing here amidst the splendor and the paranoia, you realize the truth. For all its grandeur, Versailles is a pressure cooker. The air thick with perfume, battling unsuccessfully against the odors of hundreds of bodies and primitive sanitation. Good luck finding a well-placed restroom in this place crackles with unspoken tensions, ambitions, and desires. You need a way to whisper, to warn, to flirt, to mock, to simply say, "I'm bored out of my mind." You need a release valve. You glance down again at the fan in your hand. The shepherdess seems to be looking at you now, a knowing little smile on her painted lips. She knows the secrets. This delicate object of silk and ivory is your shield, your microphone, and your secret weapon. The stage is set. Now, you just need to learn your lines. You follow the crowd's slow, deliberate drift out of the dazzling hall of mirrors and into a slightly smaller, though no less opulent salon. The air is a little calmer here. You find a quiet spot near a window overlooking the vast geometric gardens, the moonlight turning the fountains into silver sculptures. The noise of the court recedes into a low, pleasant hum. Now, in this moment of relative peace, you can finally give your full attention to the object resting in your palm. You let it unfold with a soft thwomp, the sound barely audible over the rustle of your own clothing. To truly understand its power, you must first understand how it is made. You must appreciate the small universe of artistry and labor it represents. Let's dissect this tiny machine. A fan has two essential parts, the skeleton and the skin. The skeleton is called the monture, and it consists of the sticks and the two outer guards that hold everything together. The skin, the beautiful painted part that actually moves the air, is the feuille or the leaf. Each part is a specialty, created by a different set of hands, a different master craftsperson. First, the monture. You run your thumb along the two outer guards, the panaches. They are thicker and wider than the inner sticks, designed to protect the delicate leaf when the fan is closed. Yours are made of ivory, polished to a low, creamy gloss. It feels cool and smooth against your skin, solid and substantial. It likely began its journey as an elephant's tusk, traveling thousands of miles before being sold to a Parisian artisan known as a tabletteer. These artisans were masters of working with luxury materials. They would have also crafted combs, snuff boxes, and other small precious objects. They would take the raw ivory, slice it into impossibly thin sheets, and then begin the painstaking work of decoration. Look closer at the guard stick. It's not a solid piece. It is pierced with hundreds of tiny intricate holes, creating a pattern that looks like lace made of bone. This style is called a jor, and it was a display of supreme skill. The table tier would have used minuscule handsaws with blades as fine as a human hair, and tiny files to smooth the edges of each cut. Some artisans went further in laying the ivory, with slivers of gold or mother of pearl, creating shimmering floral patterns that catch the light as you tilt the fan back and forth. Mother of pearl was another favorite, its iridescent rainbows shifting from pink to green. Tortoiseshell, with its deep mottled browns and ambers, was also highly prized for its rich warm tones. The inner sticks, thinner and more delicate, received the same treatment. Each one is a sliver of art, carved and pierced, until it seems too fragile to function. It's a bit like buying a sports car today and discovering the entire chassis was hand-engraved by a master jeweler. Utterly unnecessary, and therefore absolutely essential for showing off. Now for the leaf de feuille. You gently turn the fan over. The scene painted here is the heart of the fan's personality. The finest leaves were made from vellum, a specially prepared animal skin. And for the very best fans, artisans used something delightfully, if a bit grimly, called chicken skin. This was a mistranslation of the French peau de poulet, but the material itself was actually vellum made from the skin of unborn calves or lambs. It was prized for its flawless paper-thin, yet incredibly strong surface, which could hold the finest painted details. If you were slightly less wealthy, your fan leaf might be made of a special kind of paper, and if you were a more practical sort, it could be silk, often double-layered for strength. Upon this surface, a painter would create a miniature masterpiece. These weren't just any painters. They were specialists, painters on miniature, who dedicated their lives to working on a tiny scale. A common and very popular subject was a scene from classical mythology, usually taken from Ovid's Metamorphoses. These stories were perfect for fans. They were dramatic, full of gods and goddesses, and provided a respectable excuse to paint semi-nude figures in elegant poses. Your fan, with its coy shepherdess, fits into the pastoral tradition, an idealized fantasy of simple country life that was wildly popular among aristocrats who had never once stepped in actual mud. Historians and art critics still debate whether the fan painters were considered true artists in the same league as those who created massive canvases, or if they were seen as merely decorative craftsmen. The truth is likely somewhere in between. While few fan painters achieved lasting fame, their skill was undeniable. They had to compose their scenes on a deeply awkward, curved pleated surface, knowing their work would be folded up, knocked about, and viewed in flickering, imperfect light. They often painted the two sides with different scenes, a day side and an evening side. Sometimes they even hid tiny jokes or secret portraits within the larger scene, a little wink to the fan's owner. Once the painting was finished and dried, the leaf was carefully pleated into sharp, identical folds. Then came the delicate operation of mounting it onto the sticks. Each stick had to be glued to a single pleat, perfectly aligned. The whole construction was then held together at the base by a rivet, the rivière, which acted as a pivot. This rivet was often a thing of beauty itself, perhaps a small faceted piece of glass, a polished silver pin, or even a tiny diamond for the truly ostentatious. It's the small functional heart that allows the whole glorious creation to open and close. You do it now, snapping it shut with a flick of your wrist. It becomes a single dense wand of carved ivory. You open it again. It blooms into a painted scene. It is both a tool and a jewel, a piece of engineering and a work of art, all resting in the palm of your hand. Now that you have a proper appreciation for the intricate object in your hand, you turn your attention back to the salon. The room buzzes with the low murmur of dozens of conversations, none of which you can quite make out. It's like listening to a river. Your gaze falls upon two ladies seated on a nearby settee. They are a little older than you, dressed in immaculate silks, their powdered hair piled high. They aren't speaking to each other. Instead, they are conducting a silent, subtle dialogue with their fans. It's so quick and understated that if you went looking for it, you'd miss it entirely. One of them slowly draws her closed fan across her cheek. The other responds by tapping her chin with the handle of hers. A moment later, the first lady sighs almost imperceptibly and lets her fan drop hanging from its silk cord on her wrist. The conversation, whatever it was about, appears to be over. You have just witnessed the language in action. What you saw was not random fidgeting. Those were signals as deliberate as words. Before you can hope to compose full sentences, you must first learn the alphabet, the basic grammar of this silent tongue. It is a language based on speed, movement, and placement. The most fundamental element is the very pace at which you handle the fan. A slow, languid movement almost always signifies something positive or neutral. It conveys ease, confidence, and calm. Fanning yourself at a relaxed, steady pace simply means, I am content, or perhaps, I am warm. It's the conversational equivalent of a pleasant nod. A rapid, agitated movement, on the other hand, is a clear sign of distress or displeasure. If you see a woman furiously fluttering her fan, her wrist making sharp, jerky motions, she's not just hot. She's annoyed, she's anxious, she's impatient. Think of it as a physical exclamation point. It's the fan equivalent of tapping your foot or drumming your fingers on a table. It says, let's get on with it, or I'm not pleased. This is the most intuitive part of the language, a direct, physical manifestation of an emotional state. Even an outsider, someone completely unfamiliar with courtly etiquette, could probably guess that a slow fan means calm and a fast fan means agitation. The next layer of grammar involves how you open and close the fan. Snapping it open with a sharp, loud thwack is considered aggressive and terribly unsophisticated. It's a desperate plea for attention. You might as well shout, "Look at me." Instead, you are to let it bloom open, a smooth, controlled unfurling that speaks of grace. A half-opened fan revealing only part of the painted scene signals modesty or caution. It says, I am hesitant, or be discreet. Opening the fan, fully displaying the entire painted leaf, is a gesture of openness and confidence. It suggests you are ready to engage, to see and be seen. Closing the fan is just as nuanced. Snapping it shut abruptly is again a sign of anger or dismissal. It's the silent equivalent of hanging up on someone. It ends the conversation decisively. A slow, thoughtful closing, however, can signal contemplation or a gentle conclusion. Perhaps the most dramatic gesture is to let the fan drop. This is a move of finality. Letting it fall to the floor is a sign of utter dejection or surrender. A more controlled version, as you saw the lady on the settee perform, is letting it hang from the wrist by its cord or drag on. This gesture generally means I am finished with this conversation, or we are in agreement. It's a full stop at the end of a sentence. Historians still argue about how much of this language was a universally understood and codified system versus a more informal, fluid set of gestures that varied from person to person. Was there a definitive dictionary you could study? Or was it more like modern body language with gestures that had generally accepted meanings, but could also be personal tics? The answer is probably a bit of both. While several books and pamphlets claiming to be official dictionaries of fan language were published, many of them came much later in the 19th century, romanticizing what had come before. Yet core gestures did seem to exist. One of the most mainstream historical facts about 17th century court life was the absolute necessity of displaying sprezzatura, a term popularized by the Italian courtier Baldassare Castiglione. Sprezzatura is the art of making the difficult look effortless. You must appear poised, witty, and graceful at all times, without anyone ever seeing the hard work and calculation behind it. The fan was the ultimate tool for achieving this. Your gestures had to seem natural, unstudied, like a thoughtless extension of your mood. But in reality, every flutter was practiced, every placement deliberate. It's like a prima ballerina, making an impossible leap look as easy as breathing. You decide to try a basic phrase. You're feeling a little nervous under the scrutiny of this glittering crowd. You bring your closed fan up and gently touch your lips with the handle. This is one of the most fundamental signals in the fan's vocabulary. It's a silent plea for silence. It says, be quiet, or I must be discreet, or I have a secret. It's a gesture you'll see again and again, a foundational piece of the puzzle. You hold it there for a moment, the cool ivory, a small anchor in the sea of unspoken rules. You've just spoken your first word. You have a long way to go before you're fluent, but the journey has begun. You are no longer just an observer, you are a participant in the silent, fluttering conversation of Versailles. You hold the closed fan to your lips for a moment longer, the polished ivory cool against your skin. It feels like a genuine secret now, a small solid piece of unspoken knowledge. But the grammar of the fan goes far beyond simple movements. The most crucial element, the one that turns gestures into specific statements, is placement. Where you hold the fan on your body is the equivalent of a word. The fan itself is the ink, your body is the page, and the combination creates the message. You have just mastered the feminine equivalent of punctuation. Now it's time to learn the nouns and verbs. Let's start with the most basic distinction of all: right versus left. The hand you use is the first and most important modifier of any gesture. In this deeply hierarchical world, the right hand is the hand of honor, of public presentation. To give or receive something with your right hand is the proper formal way. The left hand, by contrast, is often considered secondary, even suspicious. In the world of the fan, this is turned on its head. Your right hand is for the mundane. You might use it to fan yourself idly, to hold the fan while you are listening, or to perform simple neutral gestures. The left hand, however, is the speaking hand. When you want to send a clear, deliberate message, a signal meant to be read and understood, you transfer the fan to your left hand. This simple act is like clearing your throat before making a statement. It says, pay attention. I am about to communicate. You try it now. You shift the fan from your right hand to your left. The weight feels different, less familiar. It makes your movements more deliberate. You are now primed to speak. The ladies you were watching earlier on the Saturday were using their left hands. You just hadn't realized its significance. With the fan in your left hand, your body becomes a map of meaning. Let's return to the cheeks. As you saw, a slow draw across the cheek was part of their conversation. The meaning changes entirely based on which cheek you touch. If you want to signal yes, you would take your open fan and gently touch it to your right cheek. It's a soft affirmative gesture, a simple, positive confirmation. Think of it as a silent nod. Now for the opposite. If you need to signal no, you do the same motion but on the opposite side. You touch the open fan to your left cheek. Right is yes, left is no. It's a beautifully simple binary system, the 1 and 0 of fan communication. It's the answer to a silent question asked from across the room. Will you meet me later by the fountain? A touch to the right cheek. Did you enjoy the Baron's dreadful poetry reading? A firm touch to the left cheek. You can imagine entire conversations being built from this simple foundation. From simple answers we move to more profound emotions. The heart, as you might guess, is reserved for matters of love and deep affection. To signal your love for someone, you would hold the closed fan against your heart. This is not a subtle gesture. It is a bold, direct declaration. You have my love, or my heart is yours. You can picture a suitor standing stiffly in his embroidered coat, seeing the object of his affection make this gesture from across a crowded room. It would be a moment of pure silent drama. To press the fan to one's heart is to bypass all the courtly chatter and speak directly from a place of passion. But the fan is not only for love, it is also for warnings. The court is a treacherous place after all. If you wanted to warn someone that they are being watched, or that you are watching them, you would bring the closed fan up to your forehead, touching it to your brow. It's a gesture that mimics shading your eyes of looking intently. It says, "Be careful, eyes are on us." This is the signal you might use if you see your friend speaking too animatedly to a known gossip, or if you notice a rival listening in a little too closely. It's a vital tool for survival. A similar gesture, touching the tip of the closed fan to your right ear, carries a related but more specific warning: do not betray our secret. It's almost comical to think about the level of surveillance required. You have to watch your own gestures, interpret the gestures of others, and watch out for anyone else who might be interpreting your interpretations. It's a miracle anyone ever managed to relax. Some of the more expensive fans with highly polished mother-of-pearl guard sticks added another layer to the paranoia. A skilled user could angle the reflective surface, just so using it like a tiny rearview mirror, to discreetly watch people standing behind them. A quirky, but incredibly useful feature for the truly dedicated social spy. You can now begin to see how these placements form a vocabulary. Holding the fan in the left hand, resting it on the right cheek. Yes. Holding it in the left hand, pressing it to the heart. I love you. These are simple declarative sentences. Of course, historians debate how standardized these placements were across different social circles, or even different years within the long reign of Louis XIV. Meanings could shift like slang, and a gesture popular one season might be considered hopelessly out of date the next. But the core concepts, right for yes, left for no, the heart for love, the brow for a warning, seem to have been relatively stable. You now have the basic building blocks. You can answer questions, declare your feelings, and issue a warning. You're no longer just making noise, you're forming words. You lower the fan from your lips, the ivory guard, now feeling like a familiar tool. You have the basic vocabulary of placement, the essential map of the body. Now it's time to build your first positive sentences. Let's focus entirely on the art of affirmation, the many ways your fan can say yes. It's not as simple as a single gesture. In the court of the Sun King, there are shades of meaning to everything, and your yes must be as nuanced as the situation demands. You begin by rehearsing the most fundamental signal. With the fan held in your speaking hand, the left hand, you bring it up and gently touch the open leaf to your right cheek. Hold it there for just a beat. This is your standard, uncomplicated yes. It's the answer to a direct binary question. Is this seat taken? Do you find this music pleasant? It's clean, clear, and requires no follow-up. In a world that runs on endless, exhausting small talk, the ability to give a simple, definitive answer without having to utter a single syllable is a small mercy. You could answer a dozen social queries in a minute this way, a model of silent efficiency. But what if you want to express a more general state of agreeableness? What if you want to signal that you are open to being approached, open to conversation? For this you need a more passive gesture. You transfer the fan to your right hand, the public non-speaking hand. You let it unfurl completely and simply carry it, held loosely, at your side. This says, I am content and approachable. It is a general invitation, a green light to the world. A gentleman looking for a conversation partner would scan the room for a lady holding her fan in this manner. It's the 17th century equivalent of putting a sign on your cafe table that says happy to chat. It's a low-risk, high-reward way to invite social interaction without having to make the first move yourself. Oh, now for a more active and specific yes. A gentleman from across the room, let's say it's the young chevalier with the surprisingly tasteful non-sting wig, catches your eye. He gives a short formal bow, a silent question. He is asking for the next dance. You can't very well shout across the parquet floor. This calls for a direct response aimed only at him. You have a few options. The most formal and polite way to accept his offer is to take your closed fan and present it to him from a distance. But you must be careful how you present it. You offer it with the handle pointing towards him. The handle signifies acceptance, control, and a positive connection. It is the fan equivalent of extending your hand for a handshake. Yes, I accept your offer. This principle of silent agreement was governed by the all-important concept of bienséance. This was the unspoken rule of propriety and decorum that dictated all public behavior. Bienséance demanded that emotions be controlled, actions be graceful, and nothing ever be too loud, too direct, or too disruptive. Every gesture had to conform to a standard of effortless elegance. The fan language was not just a fun game, it was a crucial tool for navigating the tightrope of bienséance. It allowed you to communicate essential information while never once violating the code of conduct. Imagine the alternative. Without the fan, how would you accept that dance? You'd have to try to catch his eye again, nod vigorously like a common merchant's wife, and hope he understood. It would be clumsy. It would lack sprezzatura. The fan makes it elegant. However, historians still debate the subtle gradations of assent. Did a quick presentation of the fan's handle signal an enthusiastic yes, while a slower, more deliberate gesture meant a more reserved, I suppose I will grant you this dance? These are the nuances that were likely understood by seasoned courtiers, but are lost to us now like faint whispers on the air. For a more personal, yes, perhaps in response to a more intimate, unspoken question, there's another gesture. Let's say the chevalier's glance implied something more than just a dance. Are you fond of me? His look says. To answer this in the affirmative, you would raise your open fan and let it rest gently on your right cheek. Remember, a quick touch means yes, but letting it rest there lingers. It's a sustained signal, an invitation. It says yes, and you may approach me. It turns a simple answer into the beginning of a conversation. Here is a truly fringe tidbit, a gesture so specific it feels almost like a secret handshake. To accept a secret compliment, or acknowledge a shared secret understanding with someone, you would touch the tip of your index finger to the painted leaf of your open fan, as if to say, I see the point you are making, and I agree. It's an incredibly subtle move, one that would be invisible to anyone not paying rapt attention. It's a conspiratorial yes, a confirmation that you are both on the same page. You try it, touching your finger to the coy shepherdess on your fan. It feels like a confirmation of your own cleverness. You have learned to agree in public and in private, formally and informally, with enthusiasm and with reservation. You are now a deeply agreeable person, all without saying a word. You have mastered the art of affirmation, the gentle language of yes. But the court of Versailles is not a place of constant agreement. Far from it. It is a battlefield of egos, a marketplace of favors, and a stage for petty rivalries. To survive here, You must know how to say no with just as much, if not more, nuance and authority. The fan is not just a tool for connection, it is a shield for deflection, a weapon of dismissal. Learning to wield its negative power is absolutely crucial. Let's begin with the counterpart to your basic yes. The chevalier, flushed with his success at securing a dance, now leans in a little too close during a quiet moment in the music and whispers a proposition, perhaps a moonlit stroll in the gardens, unchaperoned. This is a breach of bienséance. You need to shut it down quickly and firmly, but without causing a public scene. You transfer your fan to your left hand, the speaking hand, and bring the open leaf up to touch your left cheek. Right cheek. Yes. Left cheek. No. Ah. It is the fundamental, undeniable negative. The message is clear. No. Absolutely not. There is no ambiguity. You don't need to make an excuse or turn away. The fan has spoken for you. But sometimes a simple no isn't enough. Sometimes you need to convey a sense of finality, of utter dismissal. Let's say a particularly odious and persistent duke known for his bad breath and worse poetry has been cornering you all evening. You've given him the left cheek signal twice, but he's either too dense or too arrogant to understand. It's time to escalate. For this you use the gesture known as the drop. You look him directly in the eye and then you simply let your fan fall. It clatters to the floor with a sound that seems shockingly loud in the sudden silence between you. Letting the fan drop is the ultimate insult. It is a gesture of contempt and finality. It says you are nothing to me. This conversation is so worthless I would rather part with my expensive accessory than continue it. It's a dramatic, high-stakes move. You'd better be sure you have a servant nearby to retrieve the fan for you, as bending down yourself would be a loss of dignity. Of course, there are less theatrical ways to say no. A sharp, abrupt closing of the fan is a clear signal of displeasure. Snap. ... The conversation is over. It's the 17th century equivalent of storming out of a room. A quicker, more agitated fanning motion, remember? Our basic grammar. Also, signals a negative state. If someone is speaking to you, and you begin to fan yourself rapidly, you are indicating impatience and disagreement. I am not pleased with what you are saying, or hurry up and get to the point, this is tedious. It's a passively aggressive, no way of registering your dissent without directly confronting the speaker. Now remember how presenting the closed fan with the handle forward was a yes. The opposite holds true for no. If that same chevalier asks for another dance, but this time you wish to refuse, you would present the closed fan to him, but with the tip, the folded end of the leaf pointing towards him. The tip signifies the end, the sharp point of refusal. It says, no, I do not accept. It's a polite but firm rejection understood by all. The poor chevalier has no choice but to bow and retreat, his ego slightly bruised. Historians still debate the emotional weight of these gestures. Was a quick snap of the fan a sign of genuine anger, or could it be a playful theatrical no between friends? Context, as always, was everything. A sharp gesture, accompanied by a stern look, meant something very different from the same gesture, paired with a sly smile. The fan language was not a rigid code, it was a performance art, and the user was the actor, imbuing each movement with their own specific intention. Let's explore a more specific no they do. Someone asks you a question you cannot or will not answer. Is it true the Marquise is having an affair with the stable boy? You can't affirm it, but you don't want to lie. You need to signal, do not ask, or that is a forbidden topic. For this, you would place your closed fan vertically against your closed lips. It's a physical representation of a barrier of sealing your mouth. It says, "I will not speak of this." It's a powerful way to shut down gossip without being rude, invoking a code of silence. Finally, there's the quirky, almost comical gesture of telling someone to leave. For this, you would hold your fan open and point it towards the person, and then make a series of small, sharp pushing motions with it, as if you were physically shooing them away with a tiny decorative broom. It's a very direct command: go away now. It's a gesture you would likely only use on someone of a much lower social standing, or perhaps in jest with a close confidant. Using it on an equal or a superior would be a shocking breach of etiquette. It is perhaps the most satisfyingly direct of all the fan's negative commands. You now have a full arsenal of refusal at your disposal. You can say no politely, no firmly, no dramatically, and no with a clear instruction to get lost. In the glittering halls of Versailles, this is a vocabulary far more valuable than gold. You have now built a formidable fortress of refusal. You can deflect, dismiss, and deny with the grace of a seasoned courtier. But the fan in your hand is a double-edged sword, and its other purpose is far more dangerous and infinitely more interesting. The court, for all its rigid rules and political machinations, is also saturated with romance, intrigue, and forbidden desire. Behind the stiff brocade and powdered wigs are beating hearts and wandering eyes. It is time to learn the language of flirtation, the silent, scandalous signals used to orchestrate the very trysts your no was designed to prevent. The air in the salon seems to have shifted. The orchestra is playing something softer, a mournful sarabande that invites melancholy thoughts. You spot the Chevalier again. He has recovered from your earlier rejection of a second dance, and is now speaking with a rather serious-looking older gentleman. He seems distracted, his eyes occasionally flicking around the room. He is looking for someone. Perhaps he's looking for you. This is your chance to practice. The first and most classic gesture of flirtation is the peek. You raise your open fan, obscuring your face almost entirely. This, in itself, is a neutral act. You could simply be observing the room privately. But then you slowly lower the fan, just enough so that your eyes are visible over the top edge. You hold his gaze for a single charged moment, and then slowly raise the fan again, concealing yourself completely. This is the fan equivalent of a come hither look. It is an unmistakable signal of interest, made all the more potent by its deniability. If confronted, you could simply claim you were adjusting your position. It's a game of hide and seek, a promise of a secret worth discovering. It says, "I see you, and I want you to see me seeing you." Feeling bolder, you can move to a more direct statement. To express attraction, you slowly draw your closed fan across your eyes. Not your forehead, a warning, or your cheek, a yes-no, but directly over your eyes. This is a gesture full of theatrical longing. It says, "I am sorry I cannot come to you," or "I wish we were alone." It's a confession of a desire that is being thwarted by the public nature of your surroundings. It transforms a simple flirtation into a small romantic tragedy, casting the two of you as star-crossed lovers kept apart by the glittering crowd. It's ridiculously dramatic, of course, but that's the entire point. This entire dance falls under the umbrella of galanterie, the highly ritualized code of courtly love and flirtation that dominated aristocratic society. It was a complex game with unwritten rules, a performance of wit, charm, and idealized passion. Historians and literary scholars continue to debate whether the elaborate rituals of galanterie were a genuine expression of refined feeling, or simply a cynical high-stakes game of social advancement, where a well-placed affair could secure a promotion or a political alliance. The fan was the ultimate accessory for galanterie, allowing its players to make their moves with the requisite style and plausible deniability. Now for the most direct of invitations. You want him to follow you. You need to leave the crowded salon and find a more private alcove, perhaps on a secluded balcony overlooking the dark gardens. To signal this, you wait for him to be looking at you, and then you turn as if to walk away. As you move, you let the closed fan trail behind you, pointing back towards him. You don't even have to look back. The fan does the talking. It says simply, "Follow me." It's an act of supreme confidence, a silent summons. Trying to arrange a secret meeting in Versailles without modern technology must have been a nightmare. It was like trying to organize a flash mob using only coded glances and strategically dropped handkerchiefs. But the language can get even more specific. Perhaps the most daring signal in the entire flirtatious vocabulary is the invitation for a kiss. For this, you bring the handled penachoff, your closed fan, up to your lips. Not the tip, which signals silence, but the thick, polished handle. You touch it to your mouth for a moment. This gesture alone means "kiss me." It is shockingly direct and unmistakable command. It's the kind of move that could start a dangerous rumor or a passionate affair. You would only use it if you were very, very sure of the response. To make it a complete proposition, you combine it with placement. Let's say you want to specify a time for your secret meeting. One of the more fringe whispered about techniques involves tapping the fan. You would catch his eye, then tap the open fan on the palm of your other hand a specific number of times. 3 taps could mean 3 o'clock. 4 taps for 4 o'clock. It's a delightfully cloak and dagger method. So you could touch the handle to your lips, "Kiss me," then trail the fan to say, "Follow me," and finally tap it 3 times on your palm to set the hour. You have just successfully arranged a clandestine romantic rendezvous without uttering a single sound. You are no longer just a student of this language. You are a poet, composing dangerous, silent verses in the glittering, watchful court. The chevalier, with one last, almost imperceptible nod in your direction, has slipped out of the salon. Hopefully for his sake, his partner in this silent arrangement remembered whether 3 taps meant 3 o'clock or bring 3 friends. This is a party. You are left alone with your new dangerous knowledge, an observer once more. The saraband ends, and after a moment of polite applause, the orchestra strikes up a more lively gavotte. The mood of the room shifts, but you are now attuned to a different frequency. You start to see that the fan is not just a device for asking questions and arranging meetings. It is a real-time emotional barometer, broadcasting the inner weather of its user to anyone who knows how to read the signs. You start with the most powerful emotion of all, love. You already know that pressing the closed fan to your heart means "I love you." But love, as you know, is not a single simple thing. The fan can express its different flavors. A lady across the room is watching a handsome officer. She holds her fan to her heart, but then begins to fan herself very, very slowly, almost hypnotically. This languid pace, combined with the placement, signifies a deep, constant, and perhaps unrequited love. It says, "My love for you is as steady and endless as this motion." It is a gesture of profound sentimentality. Conversely, another woman catches the eye of her husband and quickly flutters her open fan just over her heart. The rapid movement mimics a racing pulse. "You make my heart beat faster." It's a playful, intimate confirmation of affection. From the heights of love, your eyes drift to a man standing near the doorway. He is clearly waiting for someone, and his patience is wearing thin. He isn't fanning himself rapidly. That would be too obvious, too emotional. Instead, he holds his closed fan and rhythmically taps it against the palm of his left hand. Tap, dot, tap, dot, tap, dot. It's the 17th century version of looking at your phone every 10 seconds. It is the universal signal for impatience. It's a controlled display of irritation, a way of saying my time is being wasted without causing a scene. You might see the same gesture in a game of cards when an opponent is taking too long to play. It's a minor act of aggression, a polite way to hurry things along. This public performance of feeling was a core part of court life. The 17th century was fascinated by what they called the passions of the soul. Philosophers and artists dedicated themselves to codifying how emotions like anger, joy, sorrow, and desire were expressed through the body the eyes, the set of the mouth, the posture. The fan became a perfect prop in this grand theater of emotion, an accessory that could amplify or refine a feeling. It's not enough to simply be jealous, you have to perform jealousy with the correct accessory. And speaking of jealousy, you see a flash of it now. A young woman is watching her suitor laugh a little too heartily with another lady. She isn't fanning herself or tapping. Instead, she is clutching her closed fan so tightly in her right hand that her knuckles are white. The fan is held rigidly at her side, almost like a weapon. This gesture is pure, repressed fury. It's a sign of jealousy or suspicion. She might also begin to twist the silk tassel, the dragonon around her fingers, a nervous, agitated motion that betrays her inner turmoil. Historians debate whether these emotional signals were intended for a wide audience, like a public status update for the whole room to see, or if they were a private code meant only for the eyes of a specific person, one causing the emotion. Perhaps the jealous woman wants her suitor to see her clutching the fan and understand the anger he is provoking. Or maybe it's an unconscious gesture, a genuine physical manifestation of her feelings that she would be horrified to know others were interpreting. The spectrum continues. You see a woman who has just received some clearly unwelcome news. She doesn't drop her fan or snap it shut. Instead, she lets it rest fully open upon her left cheek, her head tilted slightly, as if the fan itself were propping it up. Her eyes are downcast. This is the posture of sadness or melancholy. The fan becomes a substitute for a weary hand, a delicate accessory performing a gesture of sorrow. To convey a more general sense of melancholy or resignation, a person might simply sit with the open fan lying still in their lap, a sign that they have no energy or desire to engage with the world. There were supposedly gestures for even more specific feelings. One of the more fringe and frankly melodramatic signals was for you are cruel. For this, a lady would slowly draw the sticks of her closed fan one by one across her forehead, as if they were tiny daggers inflicting a wound. It's hard to imagine anyone doing this with a straight face, but in the high drama of the court, who knows? You'd need a complex emotional spreadsheet to keep track of it all. The fan in your hand is no longer just a communication device, it's a mood ring capable of broadcasting love, impatience, jealousy, and sadness. You have unlocked a new level of understanding, reading the silent, fluttering hearts all around you. You stand for a moment absorbing the silent emotional symphony of the room. A man taps his fan with impatience. A woman telegraphs her love with a slow, hypnotic wave. A jealous lover grips her fan like a weapon. It seems so clear, so obvious now that you know the code. But as you watch, a seed of doubt begins to sprout in your mind. Is this all real? Was there truly a comprehensive, universally understood language of the fan, a secret dictionary that every courtier learned and used? Or are you like generations of people after the 17th century, falling for a romantic, beautiful myth? This is the central nagging question that haunts the entire topic. The truth, as you might suspect, is complicated, and it remains a subject of lively, scholarly debate. The idea of a fully codified language where drawing the fan across the cheek always meant I love you, and touching the left ear always meant do not betray our secret is most likely an exaggeration. And this highly detailed version of the language was popularized much later primarily in the 19th century. During the Victorian era, there was a tremendous surge of nostalgia for the perceived elegance and romance of the ancient regime. Publishers seized on this, printing pamphlets and even small booklets that were often included in the box with a new fan. One of the most famous purveyors of this codified language was the Parisian fan maker, Jean-Pierre de Villeroy. His company, founded in 1827, shrewdly capitalized on the romantic myth. De Villeroy's son Jules even published a leaflet detailing the specific gestures and their meanings, which he then distributed with his fans. It was a brilliant marketing tactic. You weren't just buying a fan, you were buying into a secret historic world of intrigue and romance. It's almost like a company today selling a secret decoder ring. The problem is that these 19th century sources are often presented as if they are direct transcriptions of 17th century practice, which is almost certainly not the case. So where does that leave your experience here in this Versailles ballroom? Norvi. Does it mean the language is entirely fake? No, not at all. The evidence from the 17th and 18th centuries suggests a more informal fluid system was indeed at play. Think of it less like a dictionary and more like modern-day slang or emojis. There isn't a single official governing body that decides what means, yet we all understand it. Its meaning is absorbed through cultural osmosis. So, it was likely with the fan. There were a set of core gestures, the greatest hits of fan communication, that were widely understood within courtly circles. A clear mainstream historical fact supporting this is the mention of fan communication in contemporary literature and plays of the period. Playwrights and satirists frequently depicted characters using their fans to send signals. In Joseph Addison's English periodical, The Spectator, in a 1711 issue, he includes a satirical advertisement for a school that would teach ladies the whole exercise of the fan. The fictional headmaster promised to teach students how to handle their fans so as to suit their several passions and sentiments. While written as a satire, the joke only works if the audience already understands the basic premise that women were in fact using their fans to communicate. The core gestures you've learned the right cheek for yes, the left for no, the rapid flutter of annoyance, the slow draw of attraction, the dropped fan of contempt. These were likely the common vocabulary. They were intuitive enough or appeared frequently enough in plays and social situations that their meanings became standardized. The extremely specific signals, like tapping the fan a certain number of times to indicate a meeting time, are the ones historians are most skeptical about. These feel more like the later romanticized editions. The scholarly debate, therefore, isn't about whether a fan language existed. It's about its complexity and uniformity. Was it a robust, grammar-based language, or a looser collection of widely recognized signals? Most modern historians lean towards the latter. They argue that the fan's power came from its ambiguity. It was deniable. A woman could send a flirtatious signal, and if she got a poor reaction, she could simply pretend she was just fanning herself. A rigidly codified system would remove this crucial element of plausible deniability. The language had to be fluid to function effectively in the paranoid environment of the court. You also have to consider the incredible social intelligence of the people at court. Their survival depended on being able to read tiny nonverbal cues. They were professional people watchers. In this context, even a gesture that wasn't part of an official language could be imbued with meaning. If a certain duchess always twisted her fan's tassel when she was lying, people would learn to read that as a tell whether it was a recognized signal or not. The language was likely part real, part personal, part myth. So as you watch the room, you adjust your understanding. You are not witnessing people speaking a perfectly structured secret language. You are witnessing a masterclass in nonverbal communication. A series of practice gestures layered with personal tics and cultural understandings. The fan isn't a typewriter punching out precise messages. It's a musical instrument playing on themes of love, refusal, and impatience, with each user adding their own unique flourish and interpretation. The exact truth may be lost to time, but the beautiful fluttering performance is real enough. And in the end, perhaps the romance of the myth is as important as the historical reality. Your mind is still swirling with the debate between a codified language and a fluid set of signals. You realize that to fully grasp the world of the fan, you need to step away from the glittering ballroom and its silent dramas for a moment. You need to descend into the bustling, noisy streets of Paris, into the workshops where these potent symbols were born. The fan in your hand didn't just appear out of thin air. It is the product of a powerful and fiercely protected ecosystem of craftspeople, a world as intricate and regulated as the courtly etiquette it served. At the heart of this world was the Guild of Fan Makers, the Communauté des Maîtres Eventillistes. Guilds were the backbone of trade in 17th century France. They were part trade union, part cartel, and part secret society. They controlled who could practice a certain craft, set the standards for quality, and protected their members from outside competition. The Eventillistes, as the fan makers were known, were a particularly proud and powerful guild, officially recognized by royal charter. To become a master fan maker was a long and arduous process. It required a multi-year apprenticeship, followed by the creation of a masterpiece, a fan of such exquisite quality that it would be accepted by the existing masters of the guild. This system ensured that the quality of Parisian fans remained unparalleled in Europe. Let's imagine the workshop of one such master. It's a small cluttered space on a narrow Parisian street, far from the perfumed air of Versailles. The light is poor, coming from a single grime-covered window. The air smells of sawdust, glue, and oil paint. Here, a team of apprentices works under the watchful eye of the master. Each step of the fan-making process, which you examined earlier, was often handled by a different specialist, even within the fan-maker's own guild, or through collaboration with others. The master eventillist was essentially a project manager, overseeing the entire creation. He would first commission the monture, the sticks and guards, from a member of the tabletiers, gild those masters of carving, ivory, mother of pearl, and tortoiseshell. This was a crucial business relationship. The fan maker would specify the design, the quality of the material, and the intricacy of the carving. Once the delicate pier sticks arrived at his workshop, the process of creating the leaf would begin. The master himself, or a trusted journeyman, would stretch the vellum or chicken skin, preparing the surface for the painter. The fan painters, or painters en miniature, were often independent artists who worked on commission for several different fan makers. A successful eventillist would have exclusive relationships with the most sought-after painters, ensuring his fans had the most fashionable and skillfully rendered scenes. This is where a mainstream historical fact comes into play. Under King Louis XIV, the French government, led by his finance minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert, instituted a policy of aggressive mercantilism. The goal was to make France the dominant producer of luxury goods in Europe, eliminating the need for imports. The fan industry was a perfect example of this policy in action. The crown actively supported and protected the fan makers guild, recognizing them as a vital national asset. French fans weren't just fashion accessories, they were exports, instruments of French soft power and economic dominance. Once the painting was complete, the leaf was returned to the fan maker's workshop for the most nerve-wracking stage, pleating and mounting. Using a special pleated mold, the priceless painted leaf would be carefully folded into its characteristic sharp creases. An apprentice would then painstakingly glue each of the carved sticks onto a corresponding fold. One slip, one misplaced drop of glue could ruin weeks of work and a small fortune in materials. This is where the guild's rigorous training paid off. Finally, the master would assemble the whole thing, inserting the rivet that held it all together and allowing it to pivot. A quirky but important part of this process was the protection of intellectual property. Designs for fans, both the painted scenes and the carved patterns, were valuable assets. In an age before modern copyright law, how did a master protect his latest bestseller? The guild served this function. If one fan maker was caught directly copying the exclusive design of another, the guild could impose fines or even revoke his license to practice. This led to a culture of constant subtle innovation, where makers would borrow themes and motifs, but add their own unique twist to avoid censure. You can now appreciate the fan in your hand on a whole new level. It's not just an object of courtly intrigue, it's a piece of regulated commerce, a product of guild politics, and an example of national economic policy. The historians who debate the fan's language often focus on the users, but the makers were just as important. Did the eventalistes actively promote the idea of a fan language? Of course they did. It was brilliant for business. The more complex and essential the language seemed, the more indispensable the fan itself became. They may not have invented the gestures themselves, but they were certainly happy to market them, perhaps even embellishing them, creating a feedback loop between the makers and the users that helped solidify the fan's place as the ultimate accessory of communication. The silent whispers of the ballroom were amplified by the noisy, industrious workshops of Paris. You snap your fan, shut the carved ivory sticks, making a satisfying, solid sound. The image of the dusty Parisian workshop fades, and you are back in the glittering, candlelit reality of the salon. The fan in your hand feels heavier now, weighted not just with its own materials, but with the economic and political forces that created it. It is a quintessentially French object, born of Parisian craft and honed in the unique pressure cooker of Versailles. But its influence, like all successful fashions, could not be contained by borders. The silent whispers of the fan were about to learn new accents. The most natural place for this trend to cross was the English Channel. The relationship between France and England in the late 17th and early 18th centuries was a complex cocktail of war rivalry and intense cultural fascination. While the two nations were often political enemies, the English aristocracy looked to France as the undeniable arbiter of taste and style. A fashionable English lady or gentleman would have been keenly aware of the latest trends from Paris, either through travel correspondence or by observing French expatriates in London. When the folding fan arrived in England, it was an immediate sensation. English artisans began to produce their own versions, but for the highest quality and most fashionable designs, a French fan was still considered the gold standard. The use of the fan in English high society closely mirrored its use in France. It became an essential accessory for navigating the ball's drawing rooms and theaters of London. And with the accessory came its associated etiquette, and of course, its whispered language. The concept was famously documented, as you recall, in Joseph Addison's satirical piece, in The Spectator in 1711. His fictional academy for teaching the exercise of the fan shows that the idea of a fan language was not only present, but was common knowledge in London society, at least enough to be a target for gentle mockery. He described different categories of movement: the angry flutter, the modest flutter, the timorous flutter, the confused flutter, the merry flutter, and the amorous flutter. This list, though comical, aligns perfectly with the emotional spectrum you have already learned. It confirms that the core principle that the manner of fanning conveyed a specific mood was clearly understood in England. The language seems to have crossed the channel largely intact. The basic signals for yes and no flirtation and dismissal were adopted and adapted. Of course, the English brought their own cultural sensibilities to it. The gestures may have become slightly more reserved, less theatrical than their French counterparts, reflecting the generally more restrained demeanor of the English court compared to the high drama of Versailles. But the game was the same. A lady in a London ballroom used her fan to hide her gossip signal, her interest in a handsome officer, or shut down an unwanted advance, just as you have been doing all evening. One famous mainstream historical fact is the Edict of Nantes Revocation in 1685. When Louis XIV revoked this decree, which had granted rights to French Protestants, Huguenots, hundreds of thousands, fled France to escape persecution. Many of these Huguenot refugees were highly skilled artisans, including fan makers who brought their craft to their new homes in England, Holland, and Germany. This influx of master craftspeople gave a massive boost to the local fan-making industries in those countries, breaking the near monopoly that Paris had held. Suddenly you could get a fan of near Parisian quality made in London or Amsterdam. This diaspora of skill helped to further spread not just the object itself, but the culture surrounding it. The fan's journey didn't stop in England. The etiquette and its silent language rippled outwards to other European courts, each one adapting it to their own specific cultural context. In Spain, a country with its own long and independent history of fan use influenced by Moorish culture, the language took on a more fiery, passionate character, famously becoming intertwined with the rhythms and drama of flamenco. In the rigid formal courts of the German principalities, the fan's language was likely a more subdued and strictly regulated affair. Historians still debate the extent to which a universal European fan language existed. It's more likely that there was a common foundation of French-inspired gestures upon which each culture built its own local dialect of flutters and placements. You can imagine a quirky, almost comical scene. A French diplomat's wife at the Spanish court trying to signal a simple thank you, but accidentally using a gesture that in the local dialect means your wig looks like a frightened sheep. The potential for silent miscommunication was enormous. It's a reminder that this was never a perfectly standardized universal system like Morse code. It was a living language, constantly evolving and adapting as it moved from one culture to another. The fan in your hand is no longer just a French object. It's a European one. Its silent whispers have echoed in the drawing rooms of London, the palaces of Madrid, and the courts of Vienna. It has been used to flirt in English, to gossip in German, and to express passion in Spanish. The sun may have set on the Sun King, but the language he inadvertently nurtured on his gilded stage has spread across a continent, a testament to the universal human need to speak, even and perhaps especially when one is supposed to remain silent. The gavotte comes to a lively end, and the dancers on the floor dissolve into a sea of bowing and curtsying figures. You watch them trying to imagine this same scene playing out in a slightly different style in London or Madrid. The thought makes you wonder about the specific people who held these fans. It's one thing to learn the rules of the language in theory. It's another to picture it in the hands of real historical figures, to connect the gestures to actual lives filled with ambition, love, and scandal. The fan wasn't just an anonymous accessory. It was an extension of some of the most famous and powerful personalities of the age. Let's start with the epicenter of it, all the court of Louis XIV. While the king himself would not have carried a fan, the women of his life most certainly did. Imagine Madame de Montespan, the king's powerful and famously tempestuous mistress for much of his middle reign. She was known for her sharp wit, her ambition, and her fiery temper. You can easily picture her using a fan with devastating precision. A snap of her fan shutting would have been enough to silence a rival. A slow, deliberate draw of an open fan across her cheek, while looking at the king, would have been a public and powerful declaration of her affection and her status. The fan in her hands would not have been a timid tool of flirtation, but a scepter of her unofficial power. Then there was her successor, the Marquise de Maintenon, who would eventually become the king's second secret wife. She was the absolute opposite of Montespan, pious, discreet, and outwardly modest. Her use of the fan would have been completely different. You can envision her employing the more subtle, demure gestures. A fan held constantly open to shield her face, signaling her modesty and her desire to avoid gossip. A gentle touch of the fan to her lips to signal the need for discretion. Her fan would have been an instrument of piety and restraint, a reflection of the more sober mood that settled over Versailles in the king's later years. Moving across the Channel to England, we find Queen Anne. Her reign in the early 18th century was famously dominated by her intense and ultimately fraught relationship with Sarah Churchill, the Duchess of Marlborough. Their friendship was the central political axis of the time. Sarah was brilliant and domineering, while Anne was often indecisive and reliant on her friends' counsel. Imagine the silent conversations they must have had across the drawing rooms of St. James's Palace. A quick, agitated flutter of the Queen's fan could have signaled her anxiety about a parliamentary debate. A slow, deliberate closing of the Duchess' fan could have conveyed her disapproval of a royal decision. Historians still argue over the precise nature of their passionate and ultimately broken friendship. It is fascinating to think that their complex emotional story, full of love, jealousy, and political maneuvering, could have been partially written in the silent language of the fan. Of course, not all stories are so grand. Some anecdotes are smaller, more personal, and reveal the quirkier side of fan use. There's a persistent story, likely apocryphal but wonderful nonetheless, about a young lady at court who was being bored to tears by an elderly, long-winded ambassador. Not wanting to cause a diplomatic incident by simply walking away, she supposedly used her fan to send a silent cry for help to her brother, who was standing across the room. By holding her fan open and then repeatedly touching the tip to her ear, she used a fringe signal that meant, "I am being tormented, rescue me." Her brother, understanding the code, then dutifully came over and invented an urgent reason for his sister to leave, saving her from the ambassador's monologue. One of the most mainstream historical facts that intersected with the world of fans was the rise of celebrity culture, particularly around famous actresses. In London's vibrant theatre, seeing the popular actress was a major trendsetter. If a leading lady, like Anne Bracegirdle, used a fan in a particular way on stage to denote a certain emotion, that gesture could quickly be adopted by the fashionable ladies in the audience. The theatre became a school for fan etiquette, a place where new words could be introduced into the popular vocabulary. A gesture that began as a piece of stagecraft could become a genuine social signal within a matter of weeks. The fan became so identified with the female aristocracy that it also became a tool for satire against them. In countless caricatures and engravings from the period, ladies are shown using their fans in absurdly exaggerated ways, their faces contorted into ridiculous expressions of fake emotion. The fan became shorthand for feminine artifice and social climbing. These satirical depictions, while intended to mock, are also invaluable evidence. They show us how the fan was perceived and prove that its use as a communication device was so widespread that it was a recognizable trope for satirists to exploit. From the hands of powerful royal mistresses to the stage props of celebrity actresses, the fan was a constant presence, a silent narrator of the grand dramas and minor comedies of the age. You hold your fan still in your lap, the painted shepherdess gazing up at you. Juve journeyed through its creation, its grammar, its emotional range, and its travels across Europe. Juve pictured it in the hands of queens and actresses. For a century, this delicate object has been at the absolute center of social power and communication. But nothing lasts forever. The world outside the gilded walls of Versailles is beginning to churn with new ideas, new politics, and a new kind of person. The elaborate silent language you have so carefully learned is about to become obsolete. A storm is gathering, and its winds will blow the fan and the society it represents away. The late 18th century was a period of profound intellectual and social change. The philosophical movement known as the Enlightenment championed reason, individualism, and a deep skepticism towards traditional authority, whether that authority was the monarchy or the rigid unspoken rules of aristocratic society. Thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau celebrated the idea of the natural man, arguing for authenticity and directness of feeling over the contrived and artificial manners of the court. He wrote passionately about the importance of transparency, of speaking from the heart. In this new climate of ideas, the fan's language began to seem less like a sophisticated tool and more like a symbol of everything that was wrong with the old order. Why communicate through a complex web of silent, deniable gestures when you could and should speak your mind plainly? The artifice of galanterie and sprezzatura started to look silly and dishonest to a generation that valued sincerity above all else. The fan, once a symbol of elegant discretion, was slowly becoming a symbol of frivolous deception. The very plausible deniability that had made it so useful was now seen as a form of cowardice. The winds of change were not just intellectual, they were economic. A new and powerful class was rising, the bourgeoisie. These were wealthy merchants, lawyers, and administrators who had money and ambition, but no noble titles. They built their own social world centered in the vibrant city of Paris, with its own salons and theaters. While they often emulated aristocratic fashions, they also brought their own, more practical and straightforward values to the table. In a bourgeois salon, success was based on wit and intelligence, not just bloodline. Clear, sparkling conversation was the currency, not silent, coded gestures. The fan was still present, of course, but its role was diminishing. It was becoming once again more of a simple accessory for cooling oneself, its secondary function as a communication device fading into the background. Then came the tidal wave that swept it all away, the French Revolution. In 1789, the old world didn't just fade, it was violently overthrown. The storming of the Bastille, a mainstream historical fact known the world over, marked the beginning of the end for the aristocracy and the court culture of Versailles. In the years that followed, anything associated with the ancient regime became not just unfashionable, but dangerous. Powdered wigs, silk breeches, and yes, expensive ornate fans became symbols of aristocratic excess and oppression. To be seen carrying a fan with a scene of frolicking shepherds and goddesses could mark you as an enemy of the people. During the most radical phase of the revolution, the reign of terror, simplicity, and austerity became the new creed. Fashion became political. Men and women adopted simple, practical clothing in muted colors to show their Republican sympathies. A quirky and rather grim tidbit from this period is the Survivors' Ball, or Bal de Victimes, a rumored type of party held after the terror ended. To be admitted, a guest supposedly had to be a direct relative of someone who had been guillotined. At these morbid gatherings, attendees would allegedly greet each other by making a sharp, jerking motion with their heads mimicking the action of the blade. While the historical accuracy of these balls is heavily debated, the story illustrates the dark, dramatic shift in the language of gesture. The delicate flutter of a fan had been replaced by a symbolic nod to the guillotine. Even the fans that were produced during this period reflected the radical new politics. The pastoral scenes and mythological tales vanished, replaced by patriotic motifs. A fan might be painted with the red, white, and blue tricolor flag, the image of the Bastille being torn down, or portraits of revolutionary heroes like Marat or Robespierre. They became propaganda tools, but the nuanced personal language of flirtation and intrigue was gone. The fan no longer whispered it, shouted political slogans. As the 19th century dawned with the rise of Napoleon and the restoration of a more stable, though completely different social order, the fan never fully regained its former glory. It remained a popular accessory for women, but its soul had changed. It was an accessory, not a necessity. Its language, once the lingua franca of the European elite, became a half-forgotten piece of folklore, a romantic whisper from a world that no longer existed. You look down at the fan in your hand. It suddenly feels like a true relic, a beautiful fossil from an extinct world. Its silence is no longer filled with unspoken words, but with the quiet weight of history. The revolutionary fervor has passed. The shouting has subsided into the low murmur of a new century. You are still in the ballroom, but it feels different now. The candlelight seems softer, more golden. The ghosts of the aristocrats have been replaced by the more solid, more sober figures of the 19th century. The fan is still here, still in your hand, but its power, its very essence has changed. It has survived, but it is no longer a weapon or a scepter. It is now a memory, a lovely fading whisper of what it once was. In the Victorian era that now unfolds, the fan finds a new role. It becomes an emblem, not of intrigue, but of modesty. A young woman uses her fan to shield her face from an unwanted gaze, to hide a blush, or to create a small private space in a crowded room. The gestures are simpler, less charged with hidden meaning. The flirtatious peak over the top of the fan remains a classic move too good to abandon. But the complex sentence has the warnings, the specific invitations, the emotional broadcasts shave largely been forgotten. The language has dwindled to a few simple common phrases. It's like a grandiloquent tongue that has been reduced to a handful of tourist brochure pleasantries. It is during this time, ironically, that the language of the fan is more documented than ever before. As you know, clever fan makers like Leroy in Paris began printing little leaflets, dictionaries that laid out the supposed language in meticulous detail. This was a masterstroke of marketing. It imbued a simple accessory with the allure of a lost romantic age. Women bought these fans and studied the accompanying guides, perhaps trying to revive the old magic. But it was a revival in name only. It was a game, a novelty, not the essential tool of social survival it had been at Versailles. Historians still debate whether these 19th century fan dictionaries were genuine anthropological records of a forgotten practice, or simply brilliant nostalgic marketing designed to sell more fans to a public hungry for romance. The Industrial Revolution, a mainstream historical fact that reshaped the entire world, also transformed the fan. New manufacturing techniques made it possible to produce fans more cheaply and in greater numbers. The intricate hand-carved ivory and hand-painted vellum of your fan were replaced by printed paper leaves and mass-produced wooden sticks. Fans became accessible to the middle classes, which was a democratic step forward, but it also completed the process of stripping the fan of its elite status. When everyone can have one, it ceases to be a mark of distinction. It's no longer a sign that you have the wealth for a uselessly beautiful object. It's just a thing you buy at a shop. This led to a quirky and interesting innovation, the printed fan. Instead of a mythological scene, the leaf of a fan might be printed with advertisements, calendars, or political slogans. There were even conversation fans or aide-memoire fans, which had useful information printed on them. A lady going to a ball might carry a fan printed with the dance card for the evening, or the steps to a new complicated dance, like the quadrille. The fan, which once spoke a secret silent language, now literally had the words written all over it. There was no need to signal, "I don't know this dance." You could just discreetly glance down at the instructions. The 20th century delivered the final gentle blows. The rise of women's suffrage and the changing roles of women in society made the old codes of demure flirtation seem antiquated. The sleek, simplified fashions of the 1920s, with their emphasis on freedom of movement, had little room for such a fussy accessory. And of course, the invention of practical widespread air conditioning rendered the fan's primary function almost entirely obsolete. Why flutter a piece of paper when a machine can cool the entire room for you? The fan retreated from daily life, finding a new home in the world of costume drama, historical reenactment, and as a treasured item in museum collections. And so the whispers finally fade. The legacy of the fan's language is not in its historical accuracy, but in the enduring power of the idea itself. It fascinates us because it represents a world of hidden depths, a place where a silent gesture could change a life, where immense power could be wielded with the flick of a wrist. It's the allure of a secret code, the romance of a conversation that only two people in a crowded room can understand. You look down one last time at the shepherdess on your fan. She is still looking over her shoulder, a faint knowing smile on her painted lips. Her secret is safe. The elaborate language she once spoke has faded back into the quiet, rustling breeze from which it was born. The great hall around you begins to dissolve its glittering mirrors and chandeliers, melting into the soft darkness. The rustle of silks and the distant strains of the orchestra fade away, leaving only a gentle, peaceful quiet. The weight of the fan in your hand grows lighter and lighter until it is nothing more than a passing thought, a faint impression of ivory and silk against your skin. The intricate rules of etiquette, the unspoken questions and silent answers, the dramas of the court, all begin to untangle and drift away like threads of smoke rising into the night air. There are no more signals to interpret, no more social codes to navigate. The performance is over, and the stage is empty. All that remains is the deep, comfortable quiet of this space here and now. The story has been told, and its whispers are receding, becoming part of the gentle background, hum as calming and as steady as a soft and distant breeze. You can let the details go now, letting your mind become as smooth and as clear as a polished mirror reflecting only darkness and rest. There is nothing left to do, nothing to think about, just the simple, easy rhythm of your own slow breathing, pulling you deeper and deeper into a well-deserved, peaceful sleep. Let the final images fade and allow yourself to drift on the quiet, sleepy current of the night.